And good evening. It's May 2nd, 2024, and welcome to another one of our Branches of the Vine with the Bible Project and Sermon on the Mount series. So the Bible Project created this series to cover an entire year. Every 5 weeks, we're going to release another major episode, and we're going to take some time to discuss each of these videos and the creative topics that they choose to present. The videos that we're going to be discussing, they're just the tip of the iceberg. They are part of a learning series that I highly recommend, and they can all be found on the Bible Project app. Link to that, of course, is in the description. So, welcome this evening to part 2 of our discussion on episode 4 of the Sermon on the Mount, Why Jesus Connected Anger with Murder and Lust with Adultery, on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, it's when you click the subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, it's when you click that like button, because that is the way the YouTube chooses to share these to more people, if they wish. So this Sermon on the Mount, again, it's found in Matthew 5 through 7, and for me, it's the seminal moment in the teachings of Jesus. This is his longest, deepest, and widest teaching that we have recorded in all of Scripture. And it covers things that we, for sure, we love to talk about, but deep down, I think we really have challenges living. Sermon on the Mount, Episode 4, Why Jesus Connected Anger with Murder and Lust with Adultery. This is part 2 of 2. So, let's watch the video again to refresh our thoughts, and we're going to see where it takes us. Enjoy.
Imagine a world where everyone treats each other with dignity and respect. And when problems do arise, everyone works hard to do right by each other.
In the Bible, this way of treating each other is called doing righteousness.
And it sounds great, but how are we supposed to know how to always do right by others?
Well, Jesus, like any Israelite teacher, believed that you can learn righteousness through studying God's wisdom that's found in the ancient scriptures, the Torah and the prophets.
So studying things like the laws that God gave ancient Israel.
Exactly. Jesus believed that God's wisdom can be found within those laws if we meditate on them.
Ancient laws can teach us how to do right by each other today?
Yes, and let's watch how Jesus does it here in the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus will first quote a command from the Torah, and then second, he'll reveal God's wisdom underneath the command.
Okay, let's jump in.
All right, he starts with a pretty intense topic, murder.
Jesus begins, "You have heard that it was said to the ancients, 'You shall not commit murder.'"
He's quoting from the 10 Commandments here.
"And I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be guilty in the court. And whoever says to his brother, 'You good for nothing,' will be guilty in the high court." Wait, so Jesus is equating anger and name-calling with murder?
He got your attention, didn't he?
Yeah, but obviously murdering someone is worse than just getting mad and calling someone a name.
Sure, but that's not his point. Jesus is provocatively showing how murder, anger, and verbal abuse, they're all surface manifestations of something that is way deeper.
Which is?
How much you value or don't value someone's existence.
I see. Like murder is the ultimate way of saying that someone's life doesn't matter.
And so is losing your temper or belittling someone. These all reveal an attitude of superiority and contempt for the life of another person. It wreaks havoc in our relationships and communities, and it's worthy of serious consequences.
So the wisdom of this command is about way more than just murder. For Jesus, this command is about treating everyone as valuable.
Right. Jesus wants us to see that any time we demean or devalue other people, it's a failure to do right by them. His definition of righteousness means treating everybody as a fellow image of God.
Okay, the next case study is about adultery. "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'
Again, quoting from the 10 Commandments here.
And I say to you that everyone who keeps on staring at a woman in order to stir up sexual desire, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart." Okay, so Jesus isn't talking about merely finding someone attractive.
No, he's talking about the long, creepy stare, objectifying someone, looking at them like they exist for your own pleasure. And when we do this, we are stripping a fellow human of their God-given dignity, even if we keep our hands to ourselves.
In fact, this is so serious to Jesus, he goes on to say, if your eye or hand is causing you to sin, cut them off. I mean, really?
Jesus was the master of hyperbole. I mean, he just said the real problem is in our hearts, not our eyes or our hands. But he's trying to make clear that the stakes are really high.
Yeah, well, he succeeded.
It's important to remember that Jesus was raised on the Hebrew scriptures, which portray sex as a beautiful thing. But if sexual desire is driving us to dishonor the image of God in others or in ourselves, if it's causing breakdown in our relationships, it's actually ruining us, and we need to do whatever it takes to deal with it.
Well, this doesn't get any easier because the third case study is on divorce. Jesus says, it has also been said, whoever sends away his wife, he must give her a certificate of divorce. What's going on here? Sending away his wife?
Yeah, in Jesus' day, only Israelite men could initiate a divorce, and that imbalance led to all kinds of problems.
But divorce was allowed.
It was, though only one law in the entire Torah addressed the issue, and Jesus just quoted from it. The law said that if a man initiates a divorce, he has to do it in the proper way and for a legitimate reason.
Okay, so what's a legitimate reason?
Well, this was actually a hot debate in Jesus' day. According to some Torah scholars, this law allowed for divorce only in the case of adultery. But other Torah scholars argued that the law allowed a man to divorce his wife for any reason, even dissatisfaction with the marriage.
Okay, so here Jesus enters into that very specific debate.
Right. Now, if a man could threaten divorce for any reason, that would make it easier for him to abuse his wife. And so to protect women, Jesus sided with those who limited legitimate divorce to cases of adultery. And he makes this clear when he says,
And I say to you, any man who sends away his wife, except for a case of sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. Okay, and what does that mean? Makes her the victim of adultery.
Yeah, Jesus is being provocative again, saying that if a man divorces his wife for an illegitimate reason, because he's tired of the marriage or just wants to be with somebody else, his marriage covenant is actually still intact.
And that means that any new marriage is an act of adultery.
Right. But notice, Jesus explicitly assigns blame to the men in his culture because it's their selfish choices that are forcing women into these vulnerable situations.
And you can see how this could play out. In a society where only men can initiate divorce for any reason, this could normalize the oppression of women on a large scale.
Totally. In his cultural context, Jesus' statement protects and elevates the dignity of women as images of God.
But what about other ways a marriage covenant can be violated, like neglect or abuse? Would those be legitimate reasons for divorce?
Yeah, those are really important questions that Jesus doesn't address. His focus here is on how this one debated divorce law in the Torah was being twisted and misused by the men of his day.
How they were treating women like objects that could be discarded, like it's no big deal.
But for Jesus, the marriage covenant is designed to create interdependence and mutual respect so that the two can reflect God's image together as one. And that leads us back to the main point of all three case studies. Jesus is showing how God's wisdom in these commands, it's aimed at our core desires and motivations that affect how we treat people.
Someone could strictly follow these rules about murder, adultery, and divorce, but still dishonor and objectify people in other ways.
Right. For Jesus, real righteousness and wisdom means treating every human like they have ultimate value.
Yeah, if we valued others that much, imagine what kind of world we could create.
And that's exactly what Jesus had in mind. His announcement about the arrival of God's heavenly kingdom here on earth, it was meant to reshape our imaginations. God's wisdom invites us to honor the image of God in every person that we meet.
We just looked at 3 case studies that illustrate Jesus' vision of doing right by others and fostering healthy relationships.
Next, we'll look at 3 more. about keeping your word, responding to injustice, and how to treat people that you can't stand.
So, again, what'd you think? So we talked last week about murder versus hate, right? And we saw this actually in truth, that not murdering, that's really the easy part. Not hating, that's a whole different thing. Then we get to do not committing adultery, and we get to the do not lust. Again, Torah makes it simple. Just don't commit adultery. I'm going to continue to contend that Torah, even in this instance, it's easier not to commit adultery, especially the way that they were thinking about it. Because for them, it was just don't do it. You know, it's interesting when we talk about that legalism term, right? Because it's an easier thing to do. So when we get to the heart, then it seems that legalism, that argument, just goes out the door. Because now we have Torah telling us and Jesus saying, you've heard it said, that's good and right, but I expect you to do more, to be more mature. I expect you to treat others with dignity and respect, to do right by others. Murder versus hate, that just gets the ball rolling. Adultery versus lust, that just picked up the pace. So the segue from murder and hate to adultery and lust, it's really not a shock. It's just the next step up, like we've been talking about. Jesus is building here, yeah? You know, we briefly talked about legislating morality, right? That you can't legislate morality. It just doesn't work. You can't create a wide enough set of laws that are going to make something that can stop somebody from acting out. Because really it's what's in their heart. What would they need to keep down inside to stop the seeds of hate? You can't legislate away hate. And to transition, you can't legislate lust either. You know, it's funny, again, looking back at the 613, I've asked people to look at the 613 because actually it's easier to do them even with what Jesus is hinting at here. But I'm supposed to go beyond the rule. I'm supposed to search inside at my morality, how I view the importance of another, any other person. You know, in soccer, we have two terms, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Because it would seem easy, right? There's only 17 laws in soccer, or football for the rest of the world, but they're seemingly simple laws. You've heard me say before here that soccer was a microcosm of life. That was taught to me by Dr. Don Wilbur. You know, funny enough, even here, given this law concept, this comes into play as well. Because yes, there are 17 laws. You know, it's funny, but not all apply to the everyday on-the-field players. They apply to location, conditions, the authorities of the game, the community. Some apply to the field, the ball, the referees. Those keep the community safe. So not every law applies to everybody. Remember that when you think about this 613, because sometimes not all apply to you. That said, the laws are usually published in soccer in a book that's only like 5 by 8.5, right? It's only about a 1/4 inch thick. But that's the letter of the law. 17 laws. 1/4 inch thick book for the entire game that we call soccer. But there's another book. Actually, I think it's multiple volumes now. It's called Advice to Referees. These address specific events that have occurred that needed to be worked through in relation to the law. These are the spirit of the law discussions. In the soccer analogy, what deliberately handling the ball might be interpreted as. And no, there is no such thing as handball in the law. It's a very broad misconception because it is deliberately handling the ball. The laws that keep the community safe, the players safe, they guide the game. For this and for the sake of this discussion, over the years, there's even been some differing views on those. So back to our discussion on murder and adultery. They have a law for each, right? But folks can still be mean. Folks can still be lustful. Is the community better by only being concerned with murder and adultery? Or will not hating and lusting serve the community better? But now here is the very challenging and tricky part. And it involves whom is responsible for what. Because in the law, you violate it, you murder someone or get caught in adultery. The law has ways and protections to deal with those consequences. But those are outside entities, other than ourselves. We are not called to vigilante justice. We do have authorities for that. But don't hate and don't lust. That's us looking inside ourselves, right? Deep within. That's entirely on our side. That takes it out of the legislating morality pitch because it puts the spotlight and the mirrors on ourselves. That's not only harder, that's scary. That's almost terrifying, really. Because let's be honest with ourselves. That's going to be hard, especially when you start planting those seeds. When you've planted those seeds of dislike, seeds of envy, seeds of lust. We like to hide those. Funny enough for me, in my head, I picture these more like a fungus, right? Mushroom, something that grows in soil in the damp, dark, hidden from view. No one can see hate or lust. They can see the acts born of those seeds, the extensions of ourselves displayed for the community. But I think the part of the analogy Jesus uses, and I love the shift in the graphics as we moved from the outer world to the inner world, the glowing, softer dimensions of the realm of the heart. And I like their animation where we are talking about looking at somebody too long, the glowing red eye, the linger, the too long stare. I can take away your dignity and you don't even know it. That red eye. Because that is in no fashion, way, form, whatever, is that considered righteous in any way, nor is it any way doing right by others. But it's not enforceable. The community can't legislate that. There is no law against it. But it seems Jesus felt important to weigh in on the matter, and at a depth that no other rabbi was willing to go. That's because we're called for a greater, higher level of accountability to show our hearts to God. But wait, I thought God could always see our hearts. Yeah, He can. What God wants for us is to willingly open up our hearts, to stop faking, trying to hide them, to let our behavior truly show the man or woman underneath. Then we just get talking about those, and then Jesus segues to the next topic, right? We just rolled off of those, and he goes to the next topic. And that topic, then it hits at the core, both on a current community level and at a historic level. There's going to be mirrors all around. Because I think it's a logical move as well from adultery to the institution that he's referring to, marriage, right? The covenant between a man and a woman. And we also see a shift. It's kind of important in a sense because, divorce, technically, it's interesting. It's really not covered by the law. It's an acquiescence to the need of a broken covenant. The sanctity had been violated, and Moses was approached about that. So Jesus weighs in again. The practices that had developed by that need to address the initial issue, those practices, man, they had gotten way out of hand. The reasons for divorce had gotten so far out of hand that Jesus needed to reel it back in. But you know what? At that very same moment, in the same sentence, he tosses out a historical mirror. Because these people, these children of Israel, this is the lost sheep of Israel. They are in the very predicament, the very circumstances that they're living is a direct consequence of adultery with the covenant of God. God had directly referred to it as that their hearts were given to other gods. And because of the adulterous behavior, they were divorced and, kicked out of the house. They had allowed the seeds to stay. They had given the seeds a place to grow. The seeds grew into loving another, replacing God, not keeping God as their only God. We use the term adultery as sex outside of marriage, and they had given themselves to another. Jesus, he brings this up. It just stirred up a whole lot more. Because Jesus was calling out not only the wayward rules of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, their failure not to work to keep the sanctity of marriage, they widened the door for the exit. Seems they were fine with the roving, glowing red eye. Jesus said, it's better not to have it at all than to continue to do what you're doing. Roving eyes, lingering eyes, lustful thoughts, lustful acts, covenant broken, divorce. Jesus, he wants none of that. He wants it to stop before it gets anywhere. It's better to be without than to wander down that path. Don't allow the seeds to be planted. In this marriage relationship discussion, it's a double-edged sword. It deals on a personal level and it deals on a community level. It directly reflects the importance one has of covenants on both sides. We even see that reflected today in our own time and space, right? Sadly, the divorce rate in our churches, any churches, same outside as inside. And the reasons? I guess it seems we're back to the ways of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Pick a reason. Break the pact. Did Jesus address every other possibility? Every other context that could be addressed? No. And Tim and John handled that very well, because that's not Jesus' focus here. He's on the track of, look at your hearts, people. Jesus started actually pretty easy. It's easy not to murder. And now we're all the way to here. Much deeper in important issues. And we're not anywhere near done yet. But like all prophets, we need to remember where the message started. Started with repent. Stop doing what you're doing. Turn away. Turn back to God. So now that Jesus had their attention, and as a rabbi, he very much has their attention, because he said at the beginning, he's not removing Torah. But now he is asking for the hearts of the ones that say would have stood at the foot of another mount, And as they said, we will, for us, maybe on a more personal level, how about I do? Jesus wants the covenant commitment back. To not let hate fester, to let eyes linger, to stay true. Behave like the people that my Father expects them to act like, to be the light to the nations, to be the example, to love, to serve, to commit. We're supposed to be a righteous nation, doing right by others. Jesus says, I expect more. Because I expect no hate. I expect no lust. That's not easy. That will take work. You've heard it said. You've heard it said. Then Jesus begins the let's grow up conversation. Let's not plant the wrong seeds. Let's not let our hearts even go there. Dignity and respect. Doing right by others. And I think at times we always need to go back. Remember these examples that Jesus is bringing up. Because these examples, they're just there to get the ball rolling. It's just a start. This is just the beginning. He's opening this up for discussion. He's opening this up for them to take home, to talk about. Because this is going to affect the rest of their entire lives. It's not just murdering and not committing adultery. Those are good things. But when called to do the heart issue, these are things that we're going to really challenge people. Shall I say us? Because people, we hope to be the ones that are going to choose to follow Jesus with them as their Messiah, with us as ours. So, remember, in the description below is a link to the folks at the Bible Project and a link to the app so you can follow along and see each one as they premiere and all the other additional topics that they talk about. Because this will continue to be an exciting and thought-provoking journey into the Sermon on the Mount in its entirety. And I wonder what we're going to continue to uncover. So thanks for being with us tonight with the Sermon on the Mount series on another edition of The Dusty Feet.